Good morning, folks. Jeff Jackson. I quite frequently get the question, hey, can I plant some sorghum with my corn and harvest as silage all at the same time? The answer is yes. And the second half to that is you have to be cautious because of some parameters. Now, let's talk a little bit about why a person might want to do that in the first place. Well, we know that sorghum is very stress tolerant, very resilient, handles a lot of variable conditions well. First of all, very water use efficient. So the drought tolerance and heat tolerance of sorghum is far better than a grain corn or a silage corn crop. So if you're in one of those areas where you have a lot of hilly country, got a lot of variable soil, water holding capacity is not that good, eroded clay knobs, very coarse soil, again, anywhere that's going to give you a drought stress on that corn is going to benefit sorghum by a bunch. And we know this. That's why we grow so much sorghum in the west and south where we have very water limited situations. Second thing would be is it's going to give you a very good pile of fiber. Depending on which sorghum you plant, what maturity it is when you chop, you're going to get a very good, highly digestible fiber. You're going to get very good energy stored as sugars in that plant. Some varieties do make good grain to get some starch out of, but that's not the primary driver that's going to put that sorghum on that acre. It's about growing a really big pile of fiber and adding energy from another source if you need to. So biggest reason people are going to try to intermingle corn and sorghum in the same field at the same time is all about stress tolerance and maintaining that acre's potential to grow tons of feed to put in a pile. So that's the benefit. The other benefit would be cost of inputs. So it would cost maybe, if you were just doing sorghum on an acre, you can easily get that done for $20 an acre or less on seed cost only. So you're going to have a significantly better seed cost per acre for that same ton of feed. Technically going to use less nitrogen than a corn crop on that acre for a ton of feed. So those are a couple of those cost input wise. And the other thing would be is if you're in an irrigation situation, the amount of water required to raise a ton of sorghum silage is about 40% less moisture than what it takes to raise corn. So seed cost input, nitrogen input cost, and water. Those are the main drivers of why we would put sorghum with corn in the field at the same time. So those are some fantastic benefits today when we are in kind of a crunch for cash. Water's limited in some areas and we need to raise the cheapest crop we can. Okay, and that's usually our goal anyway, reduce input costs. But what are the challenges, or what do we need to watch out for so we make sure we get this right? So one of the big differences between corn and sorghum in this situation will be planting date and planting time. It's all about soil temperature. We can get away with planting corn quite a little bit earlier, if you will, on a temperature scale than where we plant sorghum. And I'm not going to try to give you a lower limit on temperatures for corn as well. But here's the caveat to this whole thing. Forage sorghum really needs to be planted in a soil that is 60 degrees and warming. And when we say that, we mean like 60 degrees at 8 o'clock in the morning, not 3:30 in the afternoon when we've had all that radiant heat to warm things up during the day. It's the nighttime temperatures to keep that seed warm so we keep the vigor and you get a good healthy seedling out of the ground with lots of vigor. Anything cooler than 60 degrees is going to limit the vigor. We extend the period that it takes to get out of the ground. We're going to slow down the growing pattern of that plant. So we really stress planting timing and soil temperature is critical to get right. So if we're going to plant sorghum and corn together, the corn's going to get planted late. We're not going to push the sorghum early. Just write that down. Okay. So the people that are doing these winter cereals, where we've planted maybe a winter barley, a winter wheat, a rye, triticale in the fall, and we're going to harvest that, or we've planted a really early spring crop like oats or spring triticale, and we're going to harvest that in that May to June 1st time frame. That works out perfectly because you can't plant corn before then anyway on that acre. Now you're going to take a earlier maturing corn, plant just a little bit later, pair that with your sorghum to get the soil temperature and the timing of planting date correct, okay? So that's where it really, really works the best, is if you have a crop before it, because then you're not trying to push the envelope and get things out there too early, get your sorghum screwed up and have a disaster. So that's point number one. Soil temperature and planting date don't always jive. So now you have to favor the one with the least tolerance, which would be the sorghum crop, and plant it later at 60-degree soil temperature. Okay, so there's number one. Second thing would be weed control. I am not going to be the guy that goes through the whole chemical guide for you and gives you that recommendation right now, but just understand there are weed control limitations with sorghum that you will want to pair with your corn crop. Now, there are some common chemistries that will work both ways, so that's fantastic. You can have pre-emerge weed control. Make sure you get your safened sorghum seed so you can do some of those pre-things and use some metolachlor products. But you need to be aware of the fact that not all the products are going to work both ways on corn and sorghum. So do your diligence. Make sure you get your weed control plan ironed out before you make the decision to put that seed in the drill, or in the planter, because most likely that's how some of this is going to get done, not through a drill. Somebody's going to, trust me. But planting timing, weed control are the first two. Then you get into this fertility gap. Now you have to make a decision on how you're going to manage your nitrogen. A corn crop is going to take or require more nitrogen to build that crop and make grain yield. Sorghum in general, we talk about the forage sorghum plant needing about 10 pounds of nitrogen for every ton of yield goal, or 8 pounds of nitrogen for every ton of yield goal. So if you have a 20-ton yield goal, you're going to need about 160 pounds of nitrogen to grow that sorghum crop. You're probably going to need just a touch more to grow a corn crop. So balancing your nitrogen in there, use your P and K as the same recommendation as a normal corn crop. Make sure you get your sulfur out there. You're going to probably need about, for every 5 pounds of nitrogen that's available to that plant, you need a pound of sulfur. So if you do 200 pounds, I'm going to use this as an example because it's going to be easy to calculate. If you're going to do 200 pounds of N on that field, you need 40 pounds of nitrogen available for the crop. 100 pounds of nitrogen out there, again, 20 pounds of sulfur to grow that crop. So remember to get your fertility lined up. So maybe you're splitting the difference on nitrogen, because too much nitrogen can cause high nitrate issues in sorghums and corn if corn is under severe drought stress. So just fertility recommendations are a little bit different. Weed control is going to be just a little bit different, but they can work if you think about that. The next thing we need to consider is plant population. When we go to plant a normal corn crop, depending on where you're at, soil conditions, moisture, all those things, you might be planting, I'm going to use a Midwest number just because off the top of my head, you might be planting 28 to 36,000 seed kernels per acre normally in a 30-inch row to have a very good corn crop. When we talk about sorghum, we will talk about planting 60, 70, 80, up to 90,000 seeds per acre. So the seeding rate is a whole nother game that you need to address with your equipment, however you're going to split the rows, if you're going to use the same planter and plant the sorghum and the corn at the same time, or if you're going to plant the corn first and come back and interseed the sorghum. However this goes, you need to just keep in mind that that acre of soil, based on the fertility and the moisture and the sunlight available, can only probably grow so many plants successfully. I don't have the magic number for everybody because everybody's scenario is going to be just a little bit different. You might want a different ratio of sorghum to corn. You might want to go 50-50. Maybe you're going to go 70-30. I don't know what your plan is. But what I will tell you is that you need to consider that you're not going to plant 100% of a corn crop and 100% of a sorghum crop. You need to make a decision. Am I going to try to get 45,000 seeds of sorghum out there with 15 to 20,000 seeds of corn? Don't know. It's all going to depend on your local environmental conditions, your little microclimate, and how you decide to do that. I will tell you that finger pickup planters, or if you can get sorghum discs to plant sorghum, is still the best way to do it, because you can get those seeds singulated, you can run it through that row unit, get it 1.5 inches deep, and do a very good job of planting your sorghum. So just consider a few of those things. The question is always, can I plant sorghum with corn and make a successful crop? Absolutely. Now, the last thing you need to consider is that sorghum, maturity-wise, and corn maturity-wise, this is maybe one of the tougher things to think about, is that in the South, where you have very hot, dry, arid conditions and you're irrigating or you're not going to get a crop, that's almost the ideal situation on irrigation, where there's no rain, because you can shut the water off. Get that sorghum to stop absorbing moisture, mature, and dry down naturally. In the upper Midwest and going farther north and east, the challenge is the sorghum will be getting right about 70% whole plant moisture, and it's just ideal to chop and you get 1 inch of rain. Well, that plant's going to absorb some moisture, and it might hold on to 4% moisture for 2 weeks. Corn, on the other hand, could take 1 inch of rain today, and as long as you could get through the field, you could probably go chop it in a day or a day and a half and get that plant moisture right back where you want it, because it's really not absorbing as much moisture, where that sorghum plant's going to absorb moisture and try to stay alive just a touch longer. That's probably the biggest challenge. So what you need to understand is try to match up your maturities a little bit. Yes, we have from 80 or 85 day to physiological harvest, or 70% whole plant moisture for sorghum, from 80 days to 125 plus. So just saying I want sorghum, you got to do a little variety selection to get that maturity to kind of line up with your area and the geography that you normally plant. What you're going to end up doing most likely is taking the corn just a little bit too mature, so it's dry. The sorghum might be just a touch wet. So then as you chop those, commingle it, dump it, push it, pack it, put it in a pile if you are. If you're going to be doing a bag, you need to get your rows probably split pretty evenly, so that when it goes in that bag, it can be a pretty darn good homogeneous mixture as it goes through the chopper and gets in there. The guys doing piles, you might be able to do a strip of sorghum and a strip of corn, or a split planter, half and half. Just make sure you understand your planting equipment, how you're going to harvest it, how it's going to get blended. You probably want to have a pretty good mixture in the pile, or at least layers that if you're going to face it off, it's going to blend very well. So again, you're probably going to take the corn a little bit dry. You're going to take the sorghum a little bit wet. It's going to make a beautiful pile. Last thing I'm going to talk about would probably be inoculants. Please, if you're going to try to do something crazy like this, try to get yourself a really good inoculant that you can help aid in fermentation, because you're probably going to miss the window on moisture a little bit one way or another, and it could be part of a field's too dry, part of a field's too wet. You're going to chop it, put it all in there together. Get a really good inoculant. Have the chopper guys and your team manage it appropriately and well, so that the bacteria stays alive, or the biology, I'm just going to say it that way, that the biology stays alive, and you get that pile treated so that you can drop the pH fast, get that oxygen out of there, make sure that it ferments well. So you spend all that time going through this process that you have a viable feed to feed out at the end of the day, because a lot of times we spend all this time and money raising a crop, and then as soon as that chopper goes through the field, our brain's on fire. We don't understand what the hell's going on. We don't haul it in at the right rate. We don't have enough pack tractors. We're not using an inoculant. You're not putting a cover on it to preserve that pile. We have documented up to, and it's very common on some operations to have up to 20 to 25% dry matter losses just because of our harvest process. Pay attention. Pack, get a really good bulk density, get the oxygen out so that bacteria in there can't survive. You need to drop the pH, get the oxygen out, and then keep it out. Keep that thing covered and protect it. It will pay for itself very quickly. So I could get off on a whole different management piece there, but okay. Planting timing, weed control, fertility, plant population, harvest timing. Those are the things to consider when you're thinking about doing this sorghum and corn together in a silage pile. Do I love the idea? Actually, I kind of do. Because some of these rations don't need that much corn or that much energy in them for cows. So let's put another really good fiber source in there to get that pile and make that pile cheaper and have a great success raising beef or dairy or dry cows or heifers or whatever you're doing. So it's Jeff Jackson, the Forage Fan Addict. Hopefully I gave you a few things to think about, things to consider, why you may or may not want to put corn and sorghum together. Another thing to consider is that we do have sorghums today that are forage sorghums that do have herbicide tolerance, meaning there are two different products out there today. One is tolerant to the imidazoline type chemistry, and the other one's tolerant to the quasifop family. So we have Imiflex tolerant forage sorghum and First Act tolerant forage sorghum. So if something like that can fit into your corn system, you got to be careful on labeling. But anyway, a couple things to think about. Have yourself a great day. This is Jeff Jackson, the Forage Fan Addict. Hope you can make some great cow chow. Catch you later.